everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Bookmarked for Love by Sarah Monzon. So this one, it's a contemporary romance, it's a rom-com, it fits within the Christian fiction category, and it's book 3 in Sarah's Checking Out Love series. So why did I want to read this one? Well, I've enjoyed reading books by Sarah in the past, and I've also recorded episodes on the first 2 books in this series. So you can look up episode 2 on an overdue match and episode 50 on hearts in circulation. So I'm going to add my usual disclaimer and say many thanks to the publisher who provided an advance reader copy, and all the opinions that I express in this episode are completely my own. And I'm also excited. I've got a giveaway for this book. I've got one paperback for a reader with a USA mailing address. And at the end of the episode, I'll give you more details on how to enter the giveaway. So let's talk about the book. Bookmarked for Love by Sarah Monzon is set in Tennessee. So we're in a small town that's not that far from Chattanooga. So we have a number of romance tropes in this one. So it's a rom-com. We have a librarian who's our leading lady, who's also a curvy plus size. And that's a really fun part of the story. It's always good to have representation of women of different sizes in our romance novels. We have midlife characters. We have Mr. Corporate Man Hero, who's about to become a CEO. We have our leading lady who had a childhood crush on the hero who is 8 years older than her. So he was completely oblivious to her childhood crush, which was a good thing for a bunch of reasons. We have our characters from different worlds who grew up effectively on the same estate. So her parents work for his wealthy parents. Her mother was their housekeeper and still is in the present day, and their father is still working as their groundskeeper on the family estate. And we have forced proximity with our main characters who will end up working together. And we have lots of fun bookish themes. So we've got the library setting with the children, and that's really fun. We've also got a publishing company, which is where our hero, that's his family business. And we also get a bit of a behind the scenes insight into the publishing industry as well. And we have family drama, and we have a family legacy that's up in the air a bit in terms of what the hero's father thinks. And we have 4 generations of the hero's family that have worked at this publishing company. So I'm going to share the first line, which is quite hilarious, and it totally hooked me into the story when I read this line. If I had a choice, a black and white cow onesie, complete with pink udders hanging from my lower belly, is not exactly what I'd pick to be wearing when called into my boss's office. And that's a cracker of an opening line. And what's happening is we're meeting Martha, who's our leading lady. We're in chapter 1, and she's dressed up in costume because she works at the library, but she also volunteers to do story time. So she's all set to do story time, and then out of the blue, the big boss happens to be in their small community library. So anyway, I'll introduce you to Martha. So she's 38 years old. She's a part-time librarian assistant, and her passion is the children's programs that they run at the library that are very valued by the community and very appreciated by the community and very popular. So at the start of the story, she's working with our leading ladies from the first 2 books in the series. So that's Evangeline and Haley. So we're all at the library, which if you've read this series, you know it's just a very much a centerpiece and an important part of their small town community. And Martha lives rent-free on a farm. She actually lives in an apartment above the stables, and she looks after the horses, and that covers her rent. And she grew up in a cottage on a wealthy family's estate, as I mentioned earlier. And what happens at the beginning of chapter 1, she's in her cow onesie, feeling very awkward when she's meeting the big boss from the city. And off she trots to his office in her cow suit. And she gets some really bad news. And that bad news is the funding, not just for her own part-time job, but for all the kids programs that they're running at the library. They've lost that funding. It has to be reallocated. So they really need to find someone or a group of people that will give a 6-figure donation to save the library and save her job. So that's where we start at the beginning of the story. I'm going to introduce you to Julian. So he's our hero. He's 46 years old. So he's 8 years older than Martha. He's a workaholic corporate guy, and he's soon to be the CEO of the family publishing business. So they own a traditional publishing company that I would say is a mid-sized company because they have different divisions. And this company, it's very important to his father. It was set up by his grandfather, and it was his grandmother who also worked there. And then his father has worked there all his life. And Julian has been groomed from when he was a little boy, being an only child, to take over the family business and to run this publishing company. So at the start of the story, Julian's very frustrated because his father just won't retire. He's in his mid 70s, has health issues, and is a workaholic and just can't let go of the company. And he's sentimentally attached to the children's division. That was very important for Julian's grandmother. And so what's going on is that he's saying to Julian, well, I'm not going to retire until you turn around the children's division and make it profitable, because the children's division is failing from a business financial perspective to make money to justify its existence. So, what that means is Julian's in an impossible situation where he hasn't really looked at the children's part of the business because he figured it was going to have to get cut because it wasn't making money and they have to stay profitable. And so he needs to find a best-selling series and a superstar author like J.K. Rowling to try and turn this children's division around. So his father will then do the right thing and retire and look after his health and slow down, etc., etc. So our meet cute in this story, it's quite fun. It's very awkward. It's very embarrassing, especially for Martha, because she's expecting to meet Julian's father and she's had interesting encounters with him in the past. So he's not exactly her favorite person. And so she doesn't expect to see her childhood crush when she turns up for this meeting to try and ask for money and a donation to try and save the library. And Julian and Martha haven't seen each other in years, and they both can feel the sparks of attraction, but they have to ignore it for a whole bunch of reasons. And he looks at her and her expertise in children's literature and thinks, you know what? She could be really helpful in terms of trying to find the next best-selling children's book because she understands children's literature. She works in a library. She's working with kids. So he offers her something that's too good to refuse. He offers her a temporary job and the promise of providing personally the donation required to save her job and the library. So, of course, Martha has no choice really but to accept his job and accept this situation because she's desperate, and really there's no other good options at the last minute to try and get a large donation from anybody else. So we have a number of problems in the story. I mean, we start off with an employer-employee relationship. So there's an uneven power balance that goes with that. And Martha feels like she's obligated to do this job and to follow through with everything. And Julian is just a slave to his job. It's the way he's been, his main role models, his dad. His dad's a workaholic, so he's followed in his father's footsteps. And he's trying to meet his father's what are quite insane expectations, and really struggling and really frustrated that his dad doesn't seem to appreciate all the work that he's been putting in. And the whole family legacy versus making hard business decisions is something that he'll be dealing with within the story as well. And so Julian has really had no time for romance. He had a fiance years ago who ditched him because she didn't get enough attention, and he's really been married to his job. And Martha has history with Julian's dad. So it was always a bit awkward because of, as I said, her parents worked for his parents. So she always felt like very much the employee. It's almost like that upstairs, downstairs, old-fashioned Downton Abbey type situation going back to England where you've got the hired help and you've got the landed gentry. And she has been a writer forever. She loves stories, and she got up the courage years and years ago, I think it was 15 years earlier, to show her book to Julian's father and pitch it. And it didn't go well. And he was very harsh and brutal in the way he reacted to her doing that and in his feedback on her story. And so she's been quite wounded by that experience. She's also years ago looked at shopping her story around, and no publishers have been interested. So she's really accepted that writing is a hobby. She doesn't have the money because she lives on a part-time wage and rent-free on a farm. She doesn't have the money to indie publish and to do it herself. So she just accepts that her lot in life is to just have fun writing and to write for her own pleasure. And she really enjoys creating characters and writing, and she just does her own thing. And so when she falls into this acquiring editor job, it's really quite confronting for her because she feels like a failed author. And she also hates the thought of having to reject anybody because she's been rejected herself. So there's a lot of emotional baggage that will come along with this job that she's been saddled with Julian. And the modern workplace is also an interesting beast. And Julian, what I loved about him is he was so aware of the complexities with the uneven power, with him being her employer and having power over her, and was really cognizant of not abusing that power and not taking advantage of her and not putting her in a situation that would reflect badly on her reputation as well. So the romance in the story kind of, it was complicated because Julian really didn't want to have a romance with anybody he was working with. He didn't want to mix business and pleasure, and of course she's his employee, so that's very complicated. And I really enjoyed this story. There's just so much to love about this one. The rom-com, there was some really laugh out loud funny moments in this one, starting from chapter 1 where she's in the cow onesie. And we also have cheeky seagulls. So apparently they're not just cheeky in Australia, they're also cheeky over in Florida, because we do end up in Florida for part of this story, which was really fun. And I loved how this story explored all the complications of a working relationship when there's romantic sparks that the main characters are trying to not have to deal with, and how they end up having to manage all of that. And we have a whole lot of family drama, in particular with Julian's father and what's going on with him. They have a very complicated father-son relationship, and the transition of power in the company to him taking over as CEO is not a straightforward process. And we also have family drama with the complications that go with Martha and her family having worked for Julian's family as well, which was really interesting to explore that. And we have the economics of traditional publishing and how the traditional publisher is really looking to pick the winner. And the only way this children's division can be turned around is if they find the superstar author who will produce the best-selling series that will then generate the income to keep the division financially viable, because the reality with publishing is that most books don't make much money, and it's the 1% of books that make 99% of the profits is how it works. So with the library, I just love the library setting, as I mentioned, with Haley and Evangeline and all the fun hijinks that happen there, and the adorable kids and the strong sense of community. And in the middle of the story, there's a very interesting plot twist, and it's really, how can I put it? To not give spoilers away, it's a really cringy romance trope situation, and it's a stereotype. And I got to this part of the story and I thought, okay, how's the author going to manage this? It was, yeah, I'm thinking it's a clean book, so I know that the stereotype cringy situation is not going to happen. And it was very fun how it all did play out. I really did appreciate the twists that Sarah put on this particular situation and how it all played out. It was such a fun surprise. And it was lovely how the forced proximity in the story, it really did draw these two together and force them to deepen. They kind of grew up together, but they didn't, because he was 8 years older. So when she's 10 years old, he's 18 and off to college, and then she doesn't really see much of him after that. They've lost touch, haven't seen each other in forever. When she visits her parents, they're in the cottage on the other side of the estate, so she's not going anywhere near where his parents are. And it was just really fun to see the friendship that was there, that connection from years ago, and how that deepened in the story as they spent time together and got to know each other. And it really laid the foundation for a fun and solid romance that It's almost insta-love, but or maybe you could call it insta-love with a twist because they don't instantly think they're meant to be together, but their romance definitely does. There's a short time frame in terms of how all of this happens. And I just love the epilogue. It was so fun to move a few years into the future and to get a series wrap up with all of the characters. So these books are all standalone romances, so you could read them in any order. But if you are going to read out of order, I'd recommend not reading the epilogue until you've read all three books so that you get a more complete picture of how the series ends. So I'm going to share my favorite book quote in the story, which is this one. Happily ever after isn't the destination, it's the journey. And boy, were these two on a journey in the story that I just loved. And it's the main characters. It's Julian and Martha who are talking to each other here. And I think it's Martha who says this. And I really loved how they both prioritize communication, and I think being more mature characters also helped, being midlife, and they understood that if they couldn't communicate and deal with difficult issues and talk things out and work things through, that their relationship wasn't going to work. And the joy of the relationship is the journey, it's not the destination. Now, I describe this one as having light and relevant faith elements. So the faith elements are there in the story, they're organic to the story, but they're very, very subtle on the page. So you could read this one as a clean and wholesome romance and not even notice probably some of the faith elements because they are very light on the page. And we do have some characters who pray when there's some major decisions that need to happen. And we have forgiveness themes explored in the story as well, and the importance of letting go of past hurts and moving forward and not letting the past hold you back. So in terms of the impact on me, it's a rom-com. So there's lots of smiles, there's some laugh out loud funny moments because it's a light-hearted romance and lots of fun. And at the same time, there were a couple of poignant moments and there was some emotional baggage that was being dealt with by both characters. So we see that playing out in the story as well. And I really appreciated Martha's perspective on the traditional publishing industry and how she had such a great attitude and really understood how things worked. And I just really appreciated traveling with her in the story and seeing her experiences working for Julian through her eyes. It was just really fun. So, in summary, I recommend Bookmarked for Love to readers who like bookish characters, where we have the library setting and the publishing industry setting and the publishing company, and to readers who like midlife romances when you've got the more mature characters in their 30s and 40s and characters who are from different worlds and who are working together. So you get that lovely forced proximity where they can't avoid each other. And to readers who like their contemporary romances with family drama and light and relevant faith elements that include forgiveness themes. Thanks for joining me today. Does Bookmark for Love sound like a book that you'd like to read? Have you read it? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening at the podcast, you can send me a text via a link in the show notes. If you're watching at YouTube, you can like the episode at YouTube and leave a comment at YouTube. You can also email me at my website where I've got a contact form and you'll find that at narelleatkins.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, and you can do that at your favorite podcasting app, or you can subscribe at YouTube and then you'll get a notification on when my next episode drops. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the link with a friend, especially a friend who enjoys reading contemporary romances and rom-coms and bookish stories, and a friend who you think would enjoy reading Sarah's books. And now let's talk about the giveaway. So I've got one paperback copy of Bookmarked for Love for a reader who has a USA mailing address, and the giveaway will close on the 5th of August 2026. So that's August 5, and that's USA West Coast time. And the link to enter the giveaway will be in the show notes. So thanks for tuning in and see you next time.